Welcome, everyone. My name is Shayla Massey. I am from Sociocracy for All. I am a coach, trainer, and facilitator with Sociocracy for All. And today we are going to do a training on Sociocracy meeting format. We'll be doing a little introduction to agenda planning and reviewing the FPC agenda. So, our agenda for today, right now, we're in the space of the welcome and introduction. Then we'll get into reviewing parts of the agenda. We'll review the FPC agenda and compare it to the recommended agenda template that we shared with you from Sociocracy for All. Then we'll do a little bit of talk about planning an agenda and how that's done. And then we'll have some space specifically devoted to questions. And then we'll do a little closing and we have a short feedback survey that we would love to hear your response to. Just as a little bit of context, the Hampshire County Food Policy Council uses sociocracy. Sociocracy is a way for groups to make decisions together while valuing everyone's voice and everyone's time. We use sociocracy in the Food Policy Council because it gives us tools to support equity and efficiency. Equity and efficiency equal effectiveness. And it means that the meetings run a certain way. And specifically, the meeting format supports very much with efficiency. So that's a lot of what we'll be looking at today and exploring today in the different recommendations for how to use sociocratic meeting format. First, we'll start with looking at the different parts of an agenda. So we have the opening. There are two parts of the agenda that are going to be the same every single time. That's the opening and the closing. And you can think of these as the parts of the agenda that are managing the meeting. It allows us to land together and get oriented to what we're going to be doing throughout the meeting that day. And then at the closing, it kind of draws everything to a close and helps us to shift into knowing what we're going to be doing for the next meeting the next time. And then in the middle is the actual agenda. This is what we'd look at as the topic management. So that's answering the questions of what do we want to get done? That's what's going to be on the agenda for the day. And then as you go through the meeting, you'll start to see shaping together what's left to do in the future. So if we look at this as an agenda sandwich or a meeting sandwich, we've got our opening and closing on the outside, and that's the bun is going to be the same every single time. And then the meat and potatoes in the middle. This is a weird sandwich, but the stuff in the middle is going to be the stuff that changes and is going to be based on what work actually needs to be done in the circle meeting. So we're going to break it down a little bit more. In the opening, we start with a check-in. And check-ins generally are asking, how are you arriving at this meeting? In situations where you are in multiple meetings throughout the day, sometimes it's fun to do different prompts at the meeting time. And two that I've heard recently in the FPC, one was, what was something really great that happened to you over the weekend, over the last few days? Another one was, what are you excited about this spring? So it's really just about creating that human connection and valuing each other on the human level of, okay, we're coming here from all sorts of different things. Maybe we just got home. Maybe we just came from another meeting. How are we arriving? How are we coming into this space? Having that context can help also to not only create connection, but help us to understand each other. Maybe you just had a fight with your partner, so you're a little bit stressed out coming into the meeting. Maybe you're under the weather, so you're going to have your camera off, or you might need to leave early. That's just informational, but also connective, allowing us to land a little bit there. And then we have the admin section. An admin is an acronym for attendance, duration, minutes, information, next meeting, and the silent L of land acknowledgement. And breaking down what admin stands for, attendance is the space to ask who's here or who's missing. That's really important for FPC, especially because you need to track stipends and who's present in each meeting. Also good to check on, are all roles filled? Is our scribe here? Is our facilitator present? Someone needs to give a report later in the meeting or in our agenda. Are they here for that? So it's also great to just check in on who's present and what you might need people there for. Duration, how long is the meeting? Just so everyone knows what the expectations are going into it. That's also a time for people to say, I need to leave on the hour or I need to leave 15 minutes early. And then minutes is everything up to date. That's the space where you are going to review the last meeting's minutes. And that doesn't mean that you actually have to go through and speak to everything that happened in the last meeting. It's more about, is there anything that needs to change? The expectation often in sociocratic organizations and sociocratic circles is that everyone will, or circle partners will take a look at the previous meetings minutes before coming into the meeting. So that if they see anything that something that they said wasn't captured correctly, or they have a question, if they thought that a certain review date was said differently than it's captured, then you can kind of check on that stuff. It's not so much about taking up meeting time to actually review it. And if that's the process that works for your circles, then that's just a choice and needs to be allotted for in the time for when you set the times for each section. And then there's space for information. So that's where, are there any announcements? And this specifically says unrelated to this meeting. You might have an announcement that technically has to do with the circle itself, but isn't an agenda item, is not a report. It's just, maybe I'm going to be leaving this circle, or or just something, it can be something general that's an announcement. Stating that it's unrelated to the meeting is really to help to discern between, should this be an agenda item? Should this be said during the reports? Information section is really just for quick announcement, not, okay, we're going to talk about this and have dialogue about it. That's for agenda items. And then next meetings, that's just confirming the date for recurring meetings that are already set, or making a plan for setting the next meeting time. And then the land acknowledgement, this is the time when you would either have it read out loud or play a video, and the facilitator or someone in the circle would share their screen and everyone goes through that together. And the next part is consenting to the agenda. And the question really is asking, is this agenda good enough? Are there any changes that you see that need to be made to the agenda? And when the facilitator is requesting consent to the agenda, or pursuing consent to the agenda, they're just going to go through and literally read the topics, the titles for each agenda item. So agenda item 1, agenda item 2, then we're going to do agenda item 3, then we're going to do review our backlog, and then saying, does anyone have any objections? Does anyone see any need to change anything in the agenda? And that's a space where, if you are a circle partner and maybe someone has to leave early and their agenda item is the last one on the agenda, maybe you would say, oh, I think we need to switch this around because so and so has to leave early, or I think this might need more time, those kinds of things. That's the time to say those things in the meeting. And so when we look at our agenda items, there are ways that we can help to be on track together on how we're going to move through the agenda item. And we use the terms report, exploration, or decision, or report, explore, decide. And when you assign one of these to an agenda item, it helps the facilitator to be clear on how exactly to move through that item. It helps for the circle partners that are present to understand what the expectations are of you during that item. So when we look at reports, it's something where someone's going to give some sort of information. They're going to either give context for something or report on something that's happening with their role or in another circle or with a project. And then you'll do a clarifying question round. So it's just questions about understanding. Do we understand what was in that report? And that's where that agenda item would end. If it's an exploration, then you would present the information or present the topic, and then you do a clarifying question round again. So that's asking, do we understand the topic? Do we understand the information that's been shared? But then after the clarifying questions, you go into reactions. So then it's, okay, now I'm going to give some feedback. I'm going to share my ideas or my input or whatever there. But then the item ends there. There's no decisions that have to be made when it's just an exploration. Then when you go into decisions, you would go through sharing the information, clarifying question round, reactions, and then a consent round. Having these designators or words next to each agenda item helps us to understand, all of us to understand together when we're looking at the agenda, what we're going to do with each item. That also helps us to set the times for each of the agenda items. And then we're going to review the backlog. So the backlog of an agenda is a list of future topics that need to be talked about. And during a meeting, typically there might be things that come up of, oh, this should be added to the backlog. We need to talk about that next time. So this is the point where in the meeting, a couple of different things could happen here. The facilitator could actually facilitate reviewing the backlog altogether. If there's not time for that, the facilitator might just say, is there anything that you see that needs to be added to the backlog? Or people can just voice it. And we'll talk more about the backlog in the next section. And then you go into the closing round. And the closing round is a time for feedback. It's bringing closure to the meeting, but it's also asking the question, how could the meeting be improved? Or how was the meeting for you? and you can give feedback on content. So that could be, I felt like we talked about really important things that needed to be discussed today, or I felt like nothing in this meeting was relevant to me. That could be the feedback that you give, or feedback about process. So I felt that the facilitator did a really good job moving through things today. I really enjoyed this part of the agenda where we did this, or interpersonal feedback, which could be, I really admire this circle member for objecting to the proposal. I'm sure that was very vulnerable and uncomfortable, but it helped us to make a better decision about how we're going to move forward. So there's different types of feedback that can be given during that closing round. Okay, so now we will go into looking at the FPC's current agenda. And let's see. Are you seeing that current agenda right now? Fantastic. Okay, so this is the template for the FPC. And this is the one that y'all had been working on for several months before the SOFA team started working with you. And so I just want to review this agenda. And what we'll talk about is the things that you really like about it, what works well for you with this agenda, and then looking at and also thinking about how your meetings flow, what things that you see here that support your meeting flow, and then potentially things that don't work so well. But we'll start with the things that work well. So we'll start with Tamar and then Emily.
I'm new, but I don't have any problem. I don't like meetings very much. So I'm very happy that we have a good facilitator in the Hilltown Food Policy Council, and we make progress. So I'm happy with the agenda the way that it works.
Thank you, Tamar.
Yeah, my name's Emily. I will note that for the year 2023, this isn't our current. Like, I wouldn't call this current. I would say it's like the previous sort of minutes model. But I really like that the circle folder is at the top, and yeah, I like that it's in a really clear font. But otherwise, I prefer the other one. Check.
Thank you. Shuguang and then Kristen.
Hi, my name is Shuguang. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. And I just learned what's aim and domain. This looks pretty new to me, but it looks great. Thank you. Check.
So Kristen and then Johanny.
So remind me, Shayla, are we saying things we like and don't like or just like?
Just things you like right now.
Okay. So yeah, I also like that, this front page has important information like where to get the folder, the aims and domains, who's in the circle, the parent circle. Review date and term date are we don't use them super well. So I don't find that necessarily super useful at this time. And I also like the table of contents where you can jump to a meeting that we previously had really quickly. One thing that I really don't like about this is that I know once you start typing a name in to the circle partners, it sometimes like runs into these other, like the other column where it says parent circle, circle review. Yeah, really annoying. Makes it hard to type in new people or take someone off easily. And then if you scroll down, yeah, like I like that there's a template that can be copied and pasted for the next meeting without having to retype out that whole kind of format.
Thank you, Kristen. And see Johanny.
Hello, my name is Johanny, and I cannot say anything because I still don't understand exact the agenda. I need to know a little bit more about the agenda, so how to handle it and everything. I've seen it, yes, but I have never done it.
Thank you, Johanny. Okay, so we've gone through the things that we do like about this agenda, and I'd love to do another round on the things that we do not like. And I know that Kristen already spoke to some of the things that she doesn't like about the agenda, but yeah, we'll just do another round. And you're welcome to pass if you don't feel like you have anything specific to say. So we'll go in the same order. Tamar?
I'm going to pass because I haven't used it enough to know that there's anything about it I don't like.
Thank you, Tamar. Emily and then Shuguang.
Yeah, I have found with this particular template that as text sort of like accumulates and everything gets like pushed down, it's easy to miss certain things or like, when things run off of the page, as opposed to like sort of keeping things in like a grid or like having like, information sort of like compartmentalized. This sort of like, becomes very crowded as you add more information to it. Check.
Thank you, Emily. Shuguang and then Kristen.
Yeah, I haven't used this. Yeah, it looks great to me. I don't have what I don't like.
Thank you, Shuguang. Kristen and then Yohani.
Yeah, so sorry I asked what I was supposed to say and then didn't do it. But yeah, so I think I spoke to some of the things that I don't like already, but I agree that it can get very disorganized very quickly. And it can feel like you're just like scrolling forever and it's not easy to see like where the new meeting starts or where the last meeting ended. The add to backlog can also get kind of lost, I find. Like things don't get always added back to the top backlog and it's not super easy to or there is no top backlog. So tracking on the backlog is hard in there in this agenda template. Yeah.
Thank you. And Yohani, I know that you did say that you needed to know more about the agenda, but I wonder also if there are any things that you can share that you don't like about the agenda right now.
Sí, o sea, ahora te recuerdo de lo que
Yes,
dice.
now that I remember, or listening to Kristen, what I've seen in the previous meetings and circles is that sometimes I don't know which is the first one or which is the next one because it's like one after the other, and I cannot see where I'm going, which one is the first one or the which is one is the last one. And something else is that I would like to have it in Spanish so I could read it first on another column and not below, because when I try to read it fast I get confused reading English and Spanish at the same time. So I would prefer it like the previous one that had one column in English and the other column in Spanish. That would be easier for me to read.
Thank you, Yohani. All right, so we've done what we like and what we don't like about this agenda. And then we have, well, this is the one that we introduced from Sociocracy for All. And in some circles, you've been working with this agenda just to go over, just to do a little bit of agenda orientation and to kind of compare what's in the current with, well, I guess this is actually your 2022 agenda template. I apologize. I thought it was the most recent one. So I'll compare it to what we see here, what's same and what's different. So you can see at the top of this agenda is the same. We have the title here, top of the agenda, the circle. And then we have the aims and domains listed, which is also what is listed here at the top of this agenda. We have space for the circle folder, which is also on the original. I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit. So we have that circle folder here. But then we also have, so we have the parent circle there, and then also listed here. We have our subcircles listed here. There's also a space for key links. So if there's any folders that are used often or documents that the circle uses a lot, then it can go there. And it's arranged all in a table so that when you're typing in the table, there are certain areas that are allotted for each of these items. And then we see here, we don't have the circle review date and term date, but I did hear from one partner and that's not currently being used. So that's something that to explore maybe in the future again to see if there's use for that. But currently it doesn't sound like there, it sounds like there might not be a use for that. And then you have your list of circle partners on this side. And we have, well, this would be partners. And this is not the bilingual version. There is a version of this that is bilingual. Let me pause the share for just a moment while I open that one. Okay. So this would be partners. There's an R there. Just one O. And then, so we do have all of the, where we'd list the members or the partners in the circle and the specific roles that are related to the circle that you're in. So that would be facilitator, scribe, coordinator, what am I missing? Delegate. And then operational roles that are related to the organization. So that would be like your community liaison, story keepers, different roles like that. And then the uplink roles. So that would be the delegate leader, operational leader to CES. So all of those roles would go here. And then this is where we have the backlog. So the backlog lives, let's see, in your current template, you have a backlog at the bottom of every meeting. Something that I did hear Kristen speak to is that it's kind of hard to track backlog items from meeting to meeting. And we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of that in just a little bit. But here we have the backlog at the top. The backlog includes having due dates. Again, all of this is listed in tables to try and help to contain. Each section is its own section. So here in the backlog, you can set the date for when the meeting is going to happen. If you do need to add new dates, you can insert this out of the way. Insert, and it's a smart chip. If you ever need to do that, it's a smart chip. You just click on date, and that's there. Do it since I'm already here. Boom, it was yesterday. So you click the due date. You can also set the priority. We have these little drop down items, and then you can put the actual item in here. And then this is where you let the circle know what you plan to do in that agenda item. We have decide, explore, understand. So I mentioned report. So understand and report are the same. So if it's an understand item, it's the same where you're just reporting on it and then looking for understanding within the circle. You're just doing clarifying questions. And then in the prepared section, that's where so whoever is going to be putting this backlog item on can say, yes, it's ready to go, or no, I'm not prepared yet with this, and I need some more time. And then here would be the name of the person who's holding it. So when it goes on the agenda, this is the person who's going to be presenting it when it comes to that item. So this is all just our landing. The first page is all just informational, general circle information and guiding information all together for the circle. And then once you go down, that's where your actual meeting agenda is. That's where the meeting minutes are tracked. And I know that in some circles, there's a model of using a separate minutes document from the agenda document. But here it's all together. So you track everything that's happening in the meeting, all the notes go into this document, and all of the planning is happening in this document as well. So let's pop back over and see what it looks like over here. One thing I'm going to note that we do not have in this template is the table of contents. And I agree that it is very, very useful to be able to have that table of contents at the top. It's definitely something that I've noted that we can integrate into the potential next iteration of the FPC's meeting agenda minutes, meeting minutes. But when we look down at the actual space where we track the meeting, we have the agenda goes in here, and then all of the notes will go in together within each agenda item. And there's no differentiation between the different types of meeting items. And that's some feedback that we also heard. As text accumulates, everything gets pushed down, or things start to run together. It gets disorienting quickly, and you end up scrolling forever. Hard to see the differentiation between meetings. So what we see here are one with the color blocking, it separates each meeting. So each meeting has a clear, this is the top of the meeting. This is the block that shows you admin. Like how we talked about the sandwich, the bun is always this, and the top bun is always this, and the bottom bun is always this little section. So you can see as you're scrolling where each meeting lies. And then within the actual agenda, we have the admin set up here, land acknowledgement. And then we have the space to consent to the agenda. Another thing that I didn't see and that no one mentioned, but this is something that I've observed in FPC meetings, there's not time allotted for different things. So what happens sometimes is that you end up spending 30 minutes on an item, and then maybe the facilitator looks at time and is like, oh gosh, we have other things we need to talk about. So not everything gets covered in the meeting. So with this type of agenda, you would be listing the time for each agenda item. And you can do it like this where it just accrues over time. Or what I did here was actually go by the actual times that we are in the meeting. So you can see it's currently 5:07. We're getting close to the end of this agenda item. And that would help when you're in a meeting to see, okay, this is how much time we have for this, and this is how much time we've used on this item already. And we have, so once we get into the actual agenda, you have the consent to agenda space. We have our designators here to tell us what we're going to be doing with each agenda item. We also included action items. So that just helps with accountability from meeting to meeting. If someone says they're going to do something or something needs to happen, there was a clear next step that maybe all circle members needed to review a certain document or go register for something. So then we have this action items. So we know we can check in at the beginning of the meeting. Did this get done? Can we mark this off? And it's not about like scolding anyone for not doing things. It's just a sense of accountability. It helps because sometimes we forget that things need to happen. And so if we see the reminder, we'll know it's there. And then we have reports. So this would be the report from the parent circle and, reports from subcircles. This allows for when we talk about the double linking in sociocracy, where you have a delegate and you have your coordinator. This is the space for those people to give the reports from the circles that they are being a line of communication for, right? So the coordinator is reporting from the top down. They're going to be reporting from the parent circle into the subcircle. So this is where they would give that report. And then if you have subcircles, that's when the folks from those circles would give their subcircle reports. Operational roles, this is where they give those reports. You find out what's happening on projects and work that's being done outside of the circle. Yeah. And this would just be the understanding. Now, if these people had full agenda items to discuss, it would be its own agenda item. So let's say someone who holds an operational role wants to present a proposal for something or get feedback on something that they're doing in their project, or they need help, or they want to start a helping circle or something, then they would be able to do that in an actual agenda item. A report is just going to be, this is the status of what's going on. This is what's happened in our last meeting. So then we have the actual spaces for topics. And then again, these designators on the side. And then at the end of the meeting, after we've gotten through all of our topics, we have the next steps. And the scribe, ideally, throughout the meeting, would be capturing next steps and putting them into this area so that by the end of the meeting, we automatically have a list of little things here that we can pop right up into action items so that we're tracking for the next meeting. And then we have our backlog review, which is where the facilitator or coordinator would lead us through looking at the items that are on the backlog. So reviewing what's there to see if we can take things off or if we need to change priority levels. If someone can say, okay, yeah, I'm ready now to go over this item that I was not ready for before, so we can do it on the next agenda. That's what the time there is. Then we go into the closing round, which we talked about before, getting feedback from everyone, just a little checkout, and then the meeting closes. So this is the template that some of y'all have been working with in the FPC. And there is a version of this that we are working on that is more adapted to your flow and your, meeting styles. So this one already did have where the land acknowledgement was included. This version is mostly bilingual. I think there are some places that still need to be translated. So it's really pretty to look at, but this is what an example of a backlog with actual items would look like here and different priority levels. And yeah, so I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions. Hi, Rosanna.
Hola, hola, ¿cómo están? Estoy en el canal de español.
Hi, how
¿Cómo?
you doing? I'm in the Spanish channel. I have a question. When I'm on the planification meeting, sometimes I get confused because there is no space for the agenda in itself. But that is, so this is the agenda, of course, everything that is going on, but in the next meeting. But while we are in the meeting and we're planning the real one, 2 or 3 days before, sometimes we get confused and we don't know who were in the planification meeting and who are in the current meeting, in the
Mm,
planification meeting.
mhm.
So some people receive stipends. So we need to know who were present in those two meetings and where should we put that planification meeting before the actual meeting.
Yeah, so planning meetings can be captured. You can have a separate agenda just for planning meetings. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about how the meetings are planned because currently, I mean, having planning meetings is totally fine. It's also a use of, y'all are already in a lot of meetings. So it's possible to plan meetings without having to have a whole meeting for planning the meeting. And if we use the agenda where we're feeding the backlog, we're tracking next steps, the agenda will build itself essentially, which is actually a great segue to go into agenda planning. And I do want to, I'm going to jump around just a little bit because I want to make sure that we talk about agenda planning because it's something that is important. But I also want to, when we go into our questions section, take some time to hear from y'all about the agenda template. And you do have time right now if you'd like to be checking that out. I put the link in the chat and you can all see that now and get in there. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about planning the agenda. And Rosanna, I hope that that was enough of answering the question. I think this is going to really answer the question that you're asking now. Planning the agenda, who does it? In many organizations, agendas are planned by the coordinator and or the facilitator. The coordinator is the person who is holding the larger vision of the work of the circle. They are the ones who are like the support system for circle members and kind of like the project manager for a circle, just to get an understanding of the type of work that they're doing in the circle as far as what they're holding. So, with the idea being that they have the larger vision and kind of know where the circle is going and are tracking the work that's being done in the circle and the projects that are happening in the circle, then they would create the draft agenda and send it to the facilitator to review. That gives the facilitator an opportunity to review the items and be like, oh, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with this, or I feel like this needs more time or less time, or I don't think this is something we need to talk about right now. The facilitator is holding the responsibility of looking at the meeting to meeting needs, making sure that we are keeping up. If we start a subject in one meeting and we say we're going to talk about it next week, and then, the coordinator makes an agenda where it's completely different topics, the facilitator might say, hey, we were supposed to follow up on this item. I want to make sure that we still do something. Even if we just like talk about it a little bit, we need to like review that item. So it can work like that, where those two people are working together. And this is all happening not in a meeting. So this would be not in a meeting. The coordinator and facilitator can create an agenda together. This can happen in a meeting. This can happen asynchronously, meaning they both work separately to do it on a shared document, like within the agenda itself, the agenda document. One person can go in and be like, oh, I think this would be good. And the other person can go in when they have time and be like, oh, yeah, well, that's great. But also this item. So that's the way that it can be done. The facilitator could create an agenda and then send it to the coordinator to review it. In some circles and in organizations, the agenda is planned at the beginning or at the ending of a meeting. Planning an agenda at the beginning of the meeting can be really challenging because there's no preparation time. So if there's anything that you need to have read before you come to the meeting or have thought about, like sometimes you really want to have spent some time thinking about something before you're just sharing ideas or talking about it, then that would be challenging. I noticed that in the FPC, a lot of your agendas are planned in meetings together with multiple people. So it might be your scribe, your facilitator, the coordinator, a delegate, and maybe, just someone from the circle that is interested in sitting in on that meeting. Can be nice for connection, but not very efficient as far as using your time, using the money that you have, like your stipends. It's much more useful for the time that's spent to be spent doing something that has to involve everyone, or that the person is like really doing something there. And when agendas can be built without multiple people present, then that leaves you time to spend your time doing things that really need to be done. And what you'll see from who does it is that the scribe is not listed anywhere there. So the work of the scribe is really important to agenda planning because part of the scribes' responsibilities are to maintain the backlog. That means that they are tracking what's there. They're deleting items as they're being put on the agenda and covered. If it's stuff that's very clear, like we've done this, we did our nominations, our selection round. We don't need to have it on the backlog anymore. They're also supposed to be tracking the review dates for roles and policies. So if the scribe is aware, okay, we're coming up on the next meeting where we're supposed to review this policy, which would be on the backlog, they can flag that or change the priority level. They have that within their domain. And that's part of how they're supporting through their role. It's not just taking notes, it's also supporting the maintenance of the actual agenda document. And then when is it done? So yeah, it can vary, but it can happen outside of a meeting by one person. This is just summarizing what I just shared. So the agenda can be planned outside of the meeting with one person, outside of the meeting with two people or more, if it makes sense in your circle for someone else to have a voice in what's happening there, or in a planning meeting, which could be just the facilitator and coordinator, or if it makes sense in your circle, other people might be included there. Okay, so how to plan the agenda. So I said before, well, we'll start with animations. So this is your circle minutes. This is like reflecting the SOFA template that I shared earlier. So you've got your aim, your domain, your roles and terms, all that stuff is at the top. Then you've got your backlog, and then there's the table of contents, which again is not on the template that we shared with y'all. But this is just a fake agenda over here for the purpose of this. So remembering this is our standard format, the pieces that we're filling in. So as we go through the agenda, or when it's time to plan the agenda, we're going to take a look at our backlog first, right? And we're going to see, okay, this is a high priority item. The term on this is January, and it's January 15th. So we really need to respond to Mike's email. So we need to talk about that because I need to get feedback from the circle on what you'd like me to say to Mike on whatever this is. So that's going to be an agenda item that's added to the agenda. And then looking at this, continue proposal on XYZ. This is we're feeding the agenda from the backlog. And that requires us to feed the backlog from the meetings. So that means the facilitator is paying attention throughout the meeting and saying, oh, we need to put this item on the backlog. That means that the scribe is paying attention to what they're hearing throughout the meeting. And as things are coming up that need to be backlogged, they're putting it there. That means that circle partners are present and contributing to the circle's work. They are thinking about what needs to happen in the circle as well. We're all moving towards the same aim, right? So if you're a circle partner, even if you don't have one of these roles, it's, oh, this is something that we need to do. We should add it to the backlog. This is something important to me that I would like to discuss. Let's put it on the backlog and see where it fits in. Someone else might also be thinking of that and just not voicing it, right? So essentially, if everyone in the circle is doing their part to maintain the backlog, again, most of that will fall on the scribe and the coordinator and the facilitator, but it is everyone's work to be active in that way of thinking of things that need to be talked about and paying attention to what's happening in the meetings. Then the backlog will feed the agenda. So again, creating an agenda, a planning meeting with 5 people isn't necessary when your backlog is, okay, we have these 4 items that need to be talked about within this month, and we have 2 meetings this month, and each of these items is going to be 15 minutes long. So we've got pretty much our agenda set for the rest of this month if we're just feeding these items through. Another place where we are seeing things come out is action items. So we talked about on the agenda, we have the action items accountability. So if it's not something that's going to the backlog, if it's like, okay, Amy is going to gather feedback from the circle and respond to Mike's email, then that's going to be an action item that goes into our action items accountability. So again, our meeting, there's the paying attention and making sure that we're tracking all of what needs to happen in the meeting. Okay, so now I'm going to, let's see, what would serve you the best in our next few minutes. I'll do a round. Oh, we have more people. Hi, Kia. We'll start with Rosanna and then Johanny and then Kia. And this is if you have questions right now, this is the time to share questions.
Ya, no tengo preguntas en este momento.
I don't have questions right now.
Johanny and then Isabel.
It's about the agenda. It's
Mhm.
about the previous agenda that we used to have before the meeting. I would like to have it done with the people that's interested in knowing what's the agenda for next meeting. What is the planification for it? I like doing that, being present and to know about what it's going to be about. So when we are at the meeting, I already know what it can be about and knowing about what type of conversation can we add up to it. So to me, it is important.
Yeah. Mhm.
And what you said that if there is a lot of content, and yes, it's a lot to digest. It'll have to be step by step to be able to learn it in a more clarifying way.
And to speak to what Johanni has said here, I think that what might even help Johanni is, feedback that I would give to the coordinator facilitator in a circle where I would like to know what's happening in the meeting and the planning so that I can prepare would be to ask them to send it out beforehand. Like, can you send this out 3 days before the meeting so I have time to review it so that everyone in the circle can actually read over things and be more prepared for when the meeting is happening? That can be really helpful without requiring people to go to another meeting or having a lot of people at a planning meeting. So that could be one way to meet the needs of having more information before the meeting starts without having to add more meetings or more people to meetings. And then we're going to go to Isabel.
Hi.
caso, bueno, yo soy
Well, in my case, I am a scribe. Right now, I haven't been using this format because I didn't know how to fill it in, but I would like to explore it a little bit more and see and take a look at something that is already done, like an example or something like that, because it's a lot of information. But I would like to study it more. It's a lot of information, and I would like to have like a practice of it. That will be all.
Thank you, Isabel. And I think I said Kristen next. So we'll go Kristen and then Kia. Sorry, Kia, and then Kristen.
All right. So the issue I have with the way this is laid out is the fact that it still looks really confusing when I'm scribing. Like there's not a thing that says it, for example, agenda item number 1 could be budgeting, for example. It should say agenda, right? So here's the agenda. And then there's not a thing underneath that says which item in the agenda it is and where to put those notes. This is the thing that drives me nuts.
So is this what you're asking about? Like if it said topic 1, topic 2, topic 3?
Yeah. So for example, if we're planning a party, like this piece of the party planning, like, whatever, and budget and whatever. I mean, those agenda items, the things that we need to get to have to be really clear. And then we know exactly where to put those notes.
Yeah, so let's play with this for a minute. So let's say we have the backlog up here. We've got
Role selection is a good one. We'll do that.
we've got a role selection. So if I'm building the agenda with this role selection item, I'm going to come down to my agenda template. And let me just do what I did on the last one. Because we can add in the words topic, the topic 1, topic 2, topic 3.
Yeah. And especially if everything is like detailed according to like time. So you have the little things for the time on the sides that I'm assuming that's hour and minutes.
Yeah.
So if you have the
So-
time for, we're going to talk about, planning meetings for topic 1, at least I know where that would go. But the way it is, I have no idea where to put stuff. Know what I mean?
Right. So if we have, because the times are always going to be these, blank things here. So let me actually just pop this up here. So this is what your template's going to look like, right? You have the stuff here that's going to happen every meeting, and then we have these topics. So if you're wanting to build it and you're looking at the backlog, you can go here, and I'm just doing copy. So this is going to be agenda item 1, and I'm going to paste. So I'm going to paste it. I know that this is something where we need to decide. And it looks like in this template, we did take out these drop downs because I think that was confusing for people. So I can just type in decide right there. And then we also have an actual template for the table, or you can just make a table in here using the insert tool. So I'm going to make a table for the selection process. And we're going to select a facilitator. We're going to select a delegate. We're going to select a coordinator and a scribe.
So in a situation like this where we have a table, nobody needs to actually take notes. You just fill in the
Fill in
blank.
the table. Mhm.
Okay.
So if you do end up capturing qualifications or something, you can, type in those notes there. Your scribe is going to be capturing those notes here. I find it really helpful to use bullet points or either just a dash and hit tab just to help to create those separations between
Right.
information. But then you can type in like a good listener, attends meetings regularly, whatever. If this was just for one role that we're finding qualifications for. So that's how you would put that. And then let's say if it's budgeting. And let's say budgeting wasn't on the backlog. It was just something emergency that came up that we have to talk about. So if I'm going to put in budgeting, I would go, okay, the item is budgeting. And then I might even think about like what specific things do we need to talk about? We have a project coming up that we need to discuss the project budget. We need to discuss the stipends for the circle. So those are the two items that we're going to talk about. We're not going to make any decisions. We're just going to talk about it. So I'm going to put explore over here. A role selection, I'm going to come back up here. So the role selection, I think, is going to take us 10, maybe 15 minutes. Okay. And let's say that this was other times up here. Oh, awesome. So we are 15 minutes into we're 20 minutes into our agenda item when we get to role selections. I think role selections are going to take 15 minutes. So then when I come down here, we're at 35 minutes into our agenda. And budgeting conversation, that's going to be a whopper. We're going to talk for at least 20 minutes on that, exploring it. So then I know, okay, we're at 55 minutes in the meeting. This is an hour 30 meeting. So topic number 3, what's another topic that we need to talk about? Let's come up to the backlog. Oh, these have high priority. This one's not ready, but this one is. We need to talk about the meeting template. So I'm going to put this into the agenda. I copied it. I'm pasting it. I like to format these as bold. I don't usually have the little ball on there. I'm just talking about what helps me to see clearly the agenda items versus where the notes start, right? So if we're talking about meeting template, this would be some general context, blah, 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 whatever notes and information, the explanation of why we're talking about it. I'm just creating it so that it's like takes up space, right? I don't want that to be bold because it's informational. And then it's not like the actual topic, it's not telling me something specific. Then I might do, let's say, if we're going to do a round of questions, I would have the questions listed there. When I'm setting up an agenda, I often will put these things in there beforehand to help the facilitator, right? And then if there's a proposal that comes out of this, that's something that I would make bold so that it's clear when you're reviewing the agenda, you can find exactly what the proposal is. It's an awesome proposal. And then when there's consent, that's also captured there. So as far as like as the meeting's going, all of that's being put in there.
So the only thing I'm wondering is like, is there a different level of detail that we're using here as opposed to the old document, which contained a ton of detail?
That's going to depend on your scribe and your circle. So if you are in a circle where you look at your circle meeting minutes and you're just like, this is literally every word that someone said and I can't tell what's important here, then that's feedback. At the end of the circle meeting, that's feedback. Or so at the end of the meeting, that's something you'd be like, I really appreciate the hard work that this scribe is putting in, but our notes are too dense. And I have a really hard time finding some stuff. So if you could like try to just get the key points out. Or you might have the opposite problem where it's like, I reviewed our minutes and there's nothing there. So the feedback then in closing round would be, really appreciate the scribe's hard work. I know it's a difficult job to have, and I need a little bit more detail so that I can be able to follow what's happening, even if I'm not in a meeting.
Okay, so going back to budgeting, and Emily's got her hand up, so I'm going to
Yeah.
stop. But going back to budgeting, so we have a project budget and then stipends, for example. So
Mhm.
if we wanted to put some detail underneath stipends, for example, like who does it go to, blah, blah, blah. Like
Mhm.
you can just put that, just stick
Yep.
it.
Who it goes to, other stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. That's good enough. Thank you.
Emily, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Sheila, for all your help. The main things that I'm noticing with people who are intimidated by scribing in this is I feel like it's unclear to people that this is actually a table in Google Docs and that you are adding rows as needed. So if you right click in any of these, you can do add row above or below. And typically what I do when I'm scribing or if I'm coordinating and like laying out the agenda is like, like the next steps section, I'll just highlight the whole thing and copy and paste so
Mhm,
that the format is exactly the same. And we have the drop down. We have the little hours, minutes,
mhm.
and you know that you're gonna have it there. And I think also like and besides that, everything is exactly the same, like you just said, as the way we were scribing before. But then I also think the backlog is intimidating to people. And maybe we've kind of like demystified it already, but I feel like, for newer scribes,
Mhm.
this is the part where you kinda lose them.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. A lot of great things there. So, one of the things that Emily was talking about was how do you set up the next meeting? So, I'm just going to go over that really quickly. So, when you are using copying the template, so this is the meeting that we just had, right? So, let's say that's the end of the meeting. I'm the scribe. I'm setting up the next shell of a meeting. So, I don't want to use this one because I want to have all of those clear, like default settings, I guess, with the hours and minutes, the topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. I wanna see clearly what I need to do. So if you go to the bottom corner and you have the eye cursor, you're gonna highlight in the bottom and then just highlight the entire table slowly. Come on, just a little bit more. Just up to the top where the meeting agenda minutes section. You want all to be highlighted, and then you're gonna copy, that's Control C, or if you're on an Apple, then Command C, and then go up to the next space above the last meeting minutes and make some space, and then just paste it there. And then you have your next meeting ready to go. You can set your hours and minutes. You can put in the topics. Again, you're going up to your backlog and seeing what needs to be there. And I wonder if people have specific questions about the backlog, if there's anything that I can help you with that would make it a little bit easier to work with. I mean, it's you can change the items here. In order to delete something, you can right click and then just delete the row. So if we've already gone over a meeting template, then I'll just delete that item and then it's off of the backlog. If we need to add something again, you're right clicking and you can insert another row. And then you have all the things here. Again, if you need to add the date, you can go over to insert, smart chips, and then select the date. You can put that in there. The different designators of priority. If you click on any of these, they have little tiny arrows to the side. And then the one green is the low priority, mid priority, high priority. This is if something is just needs to stay on the backlog, but there's no activity, there's no action on it for now, but you want to make sure it's still there. It can stay on the backlog like that. And it might be helpful to look at one that's been filled out. So let's take a look at what circle.
You can use food policy. We're using it
Food
there.
policy. Food policy minutes. Yeah, here's one that's filled out. So food policy circle, all the aims domains, parent circle, subcircles, circle folders, the roles of the different partners. You can see how that's being used here. Ooh, and I like that it even has like the information about what the connection is, what the links are. And then we have the backlog, a very robust backlog of the different items. We have our priority settings here, right? We know that these two items are not yet prepared, but they're also low priority, so that's totally fine. We've got our high priority item that is prepared. And then here we have the meetings highlighted. I believe that was because there was some challenge or confusion about where the meetings actually started because there's a lot of information here. So as we go down, we see all of the meeting information. There's the link to the Zoom room. That's always that Zoom room. The date and time of the meeting. We have all of our admin stuff here. And then we have the actual list of what's going to happen in the meeting as part of the consent to agenda. So the facilitator is just reading this list. And then we have our action items. Oh, and y'all have highlighted these items also to help make it clear where the topics are. So each of these highlighted blue sections are where the topics are for each agenda item, and then it's broken down here. It's where the information goes. So the scribe is going to be putting information in here as it's going through the meeting. So this is what the agenda looks like when it's being used. You can see there's a lot of information here, and it's just easy to find. It's right there. Well, maybe it's easy to find. Everyone can have their own experience with this, but it's separated. There are clear sections of the table and all of that. Okay. Any other? Oh, we were actually going in around, weren't we? Oh, it's Kristen's turn.
So yeah, thanks so much, Shayla and Dem, for creating this and sharing it with us. I really like the template. I like how you've integrated some of the specific like requests that have been made, adding like land acknowledgement. And one thing that I was wondering, like, if adding consent to the agenda to the admin section would make sense. And mostly because when you're planning the meeting agenda, I try to keep the like chunks of time as easy as possible. I guess like I usually do things in like 5-minute chunks. And when you add 1 minute in there, it gets really wonky with the timing. That's one idea I had. And otherwise, really appreciate what Emily said. I think that is a place of confusion, like that this is a table and that you have to kind of treat it that way when adding a row or deleting a row. So just making sure that scribes understand that and also have the skills to know how to manage a table, because that is really essential to be able to add or take away space. I kind of missed the little drop down that says like understand or explore or decide on the side, and feel like it is pretty user friendly if people know how to use it, like understand that it's a click and a drop down, which also is in the backlog. So if people are using the backlog and seeing it work that way, people could understand that it's the same in the body of the agenda. I think also like making sure that folks understand that like this is meant to be typed into, because in the past, sometimes we would have an agenda and then we would take notes separately, like down below the agenda. So realizing that like it's actually meant to be like filled in as you go through the meeting. So you start with an agenda, and then as you go through the meeting, the agenda starts to basically expand as you type in the notes from that agenda. So there's a little difference there from having notes separately below the agenda, which I really like the way that it kind of populates. And I think like this is also really handy for planning meetings. In the past, we often would take notes at our planning meeting and then build an agenda. Whereas with this template, you actually don't need to take notes in the planning meeting. You can just be building the agenda directly. You build out this agenda. So in some of the meetings, the planning meetings that I've been in, we haven't been, to speak to Rosanna's question, we haven't been doing notes for the planning meeting. We've actually just been making the template for the next meeting and then filling it in with the agenda items as the planning. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And I'll also add to that, if you're taking notes in the planning meeting, you're probably talking about the agenda items. You're probably already having the meeting that you are planning without all the members there to actually have that meeting with you. Yeah. Let's see. Who was next? Tamar.
The only thing I can say is that at 70 years old, even though I used to work with computers in hospitals, this is quite intimidating. I mean, I know what a table is, but this is intimidating.
Have you played with this at all? Like just
No, but
typing
I
in it
haven't
or?
had an opportunity to. I've never really seen it until this week.
Yeah, well, this one that we have here, the FPC meeting format class, SOFA template, feedback copy, the one that I shared in the chat, this is one that you can play in to become more comfortable with it. That's not impacting anything with your meetings or anything.
Right.
So yeah, feel free to play with stuff. You can't break anything. If you do break it, we can just paste another template in there.
So when you say you posted it in the chat, when this meeting is over, where would I find it?
Yeah, I was
Well,
wondering if maybe we would send out the slides after and you
yeah.
could include it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll actually go ahead and put it on the slides now. I'll add it here. explore the proposed new template here. I'll ask if there are any more questions, and then our closing is the 5 minutes for y'all to fill out this form. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias. Adiós.